So I think both of us and probably the rest of us have found ourselves with quite a bit of time locked up, cooped up inside our homes. And now this is a good time not only to catch up on your latest Netflix series, but it's also a good time to start a new hobby. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. I'm Jason Cipriani with Jason Perlow, and this is Jason Squared. So Jason, we have probably a few more weeks, if not longer, of stay-at-home orders and self-quarantines and all of that going on. What are you doing to help you pass the time?
Well, there's only so much work you can do all day, right? I mean, of course, we've both talking about working from home, working at your desk, doing all sorts of things, but you got
Right.
to have downtime. You got to have spare time, and you don't want to use all that spare time sitting in front of a computer screen, a pad screen, your phone screen, your TV
Right.
screen. There's only so many, Netflix things you can watch and computer games you can play before you start to go completely crazy. Um, so there's a lot of things you can do, hobbies that, that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, that are productive and things that you can have fun with. Old school arts and craft types things, but also, making food items too is something that can be fun and useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing I've been doing, and it's actually been a hobby of mine for the last, I don't know, 6 years or so, is making beer. I make my own homemade beer. I have quite a fancy and sophisticated setup with admittedly thousands of dollars invested into all the different equipment, but making beer at home isn't an expensive endeavor at all. You can get a starter kit to make your own beer at home for probably around $150, I would say, for an extract kit. And the process is fun. There's quite a bit of science involved in making beer. It's not as simple as you would think. There's a lot of different variables and aspects to brewing your own beer. But like morebeer.com, northernbrewer.com, websites like that are still selling hops and kits and extract and everything you would need to bottles, all that to make your own beer at home. A normal kit makes 5 gallons of beer, which is a lot of beer. It's about 52 bottles or so. And, it takes a month or 3 weeks to a month, depending on if you want to rush it. But one thing it's taught me over the years is patience. Making beer and letting yeast do its thing is something you cannot rush, especially once you get to that point. What's something you've been doing, Jason?
So, Rachel and I have, well, I don't brew beer, because I'm not a huge beer drinker anymore. I mean, I love it when someone serves it to me. I get it at a pub or something, but I haven't
Sure.
made it. We have I am a big cocktails fanatic.
Okay.
I got to have my cocktail hour at the end of the day, sometimes earlier than the end of the day these days. But so one of the ways that you can really expand your home bar without spending a lot of money and produce some really good cocktails, especially if you like margaritas and daiquiris and things like that, the fruitier stuff, the sour stuff. You can infuse base alcohol such as vodka and rum with fruits, right? And
Okay.
or other things. So the common things that I usually do is I buy the American vodka from Costco, the $14 bottle, 1.75 liter, 80 proof vodka, and I will infuse that for 2 weeks with my choice of fresh fruit that I get from the supermarket or from the delivery service.
Really?
So whatever's in your season or whatever I can get, whether it's strawberries or blackberries or blueberries. Even bananas and rum is great. You slice that up. You get yourself a big container. You pour the alcohol on top of the fruit. You let it sit for sometimes a week is enough. Maybe 2 weeks. You get some better results out of certain types of fruit. For orange zest and for different types of citrus fruits, they do have oils in the actual skin. So you're going to need a higher proof alcohol for that, probably 100 proof vodka, or you can get the 126 proof Jamaican rum. You can use Everclear also. But really, you only need to do that for oily types of fruits, like for citrus. Pretty much for regular fruit, an 80 proof vodka or 80 proof rum is perfectly fine. You let it sit for 2 weeks, then you strain it, and then now you have your fruit flavored booze. If you want to make it sweeter, you add a little bit of simple syrup to it,
Gotcha.
to the bottle, or you do it to the drink as you need it. And it makes a great base for a cocktail. I love making margaritas or daiquiris with the fruit flavored alcohols. And it's more natural and tastes better than any commercial product you can possibly get for that kind of thing.
So do you just try it throughout the 2 weeks until you get to a flavor profile you like, or do you just go set 2 weeks?
At the end of the first week, I'll taste and like, yeah, let's see if I need it or not, and then let it go another week, if it needs it.
Absolutely.
Shake it up
So,
a bit every other
yeah,
day.
that makes sense. I don't like hard alcohol all that much, but that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen shows where people do that, and watch videos of making their own homemade liquor and adding flavors to it. But I've never thought about doing it to store-bought liquor. So that's an interesting approach. Another thing I've been doing is making homemade pizza. And this is, again, something I've done for quite a while before everything that's going on. And I've continued doing it. And actually, it gives me a little bit more time to experiment. There's a lot of debate in the pizza world. It's funny. These hobbies have their own worlds where, there's dogma and tradition. And then there's also the new way of doing things. And one of those common debates is whether or not you should let your pizza dough cold ferment, which means you mix up your dough and you let it sit in the fridge for 4 days, a week,
Yeah.
let it ferment out and add a little bit of a different flavor to your dough, or whether or not you make it in the morning and bake it that night. I personally prefer a dough that's been made and set in the fridge for 4 or 5 days. I think the little bit of sourness and tanginess that it provides to the dough is better. It's my personal preference. I like that better than dough that was made the morning of. But I use a website. It is pizzacreator.net. You go on this website, you pick your type of pizza. There's American, Sicilian, and I think there's a few other different options on there, and how many dough balls you need. And it tells you the exact amount of ingredients you need to put in. You can really dive deep into it and adjust like the hydration percentage or the percentage of yeast and salt and all of that if you want to really geek out on it. Or you could do a very basic, just pick the type of pizza you want, how many dough balls, and it'll tell you how much flour, water, yeast, and salt. And some styles use sugar as well as olive oil as well. Have you messed around? I've seen it quite a bit with sourdough starters.
Yeah, so it's funny, if you look at the Twitter feeds, a lot of people are doing sourdough. Now the reason why people are doing sourdough, it's not just suddenly everyone decided, wow, we all need to do sourdough. It's because there are shortages right now. Well, one, of course, it's harder to find bread in supermarkets right now because people are hoarding and buying lots of basic food items, right? Pre-prepared basic food items. But you can get flour.
Yes.
But apparently it's harder to get yeast for some particular reason.
I have seen that.
So sourdough, the ancient ways of making sourdough bread do not require buying, they didn't use a yeast starter. Yeast is something that exists in the environment around us, right? It's a microbe. You basically begin a natural fermentation process with flour and water, and you let it ferment for a couple of days. And what happens is that the environmental yeast comes and feeds on the sugars in the flour, and over a couple of days, you're going to create a sourdough starter or bread starter, right? A fermentation starter. Now, there are some people that maintain their starters for years and years and years and years and years. I mean, I know some guy, somebody else in the computer industry. He went out to Italy, a couple years ago, and got some 400-year-old starter from a baker in Italy, who's apparently the same family. Apparently, has been feeding and feeding and feeding, because you basically, every time you make a bread, you take some of the flour out, and that just keeps living and goes on and on. Some people even give them names like pets.
Yeah, right.
So. But sourdough is a process. It does take a while to create a good starter. Like I said, you got to have it nice and fermented for it to be alive, for it to continue to gestate doughs and things like that. So it's a great hobby, and the results are fantastic, because when you have a really nice sourdough, big, crusty sourdough bread, it's a huge payoff.
Yeah, I keep, for years I've said, because I make bread as well. It's not as often as I do pizza, but for years I've said I'm going to start a sourdough starter and then feed the mother and keep doing it over and over and over. And I just have always put it off. And even, we've been in our house for 3 weeks now. I still have not done it yet. And it's kind of intimidating. You look at all the guides and you have to keep feeding it every other day. You have to take some out.
It's like the
But
ultimate Tamagotchi, dude.
yeah,
And your first couple results aren't always great. Our first couple of sourdoughs have been flat and dense, but guess
sure.
what? We still eat them and they're still pretty good.
Yeah,
I sliced them up and I made them into crostinis and stuff, even though they weren't great sandwich breads. So it does take a couple of tries. We're getting better at it. It's a
sure.
skill you have to develop, and that's a hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of it. That's doing plenty of research, getting into those worlds that hobbies have. Reddit is a great place to get lost into hobbies. There's subreddits for everything, whether it's home brewing, bread making. I'm sure there's a bed making subreddit as well.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised at all. Another thing I have kind of been dabbling in for a few years, and I'm seriously considering diving a little bit deeper, is Raspberry Pi projects. I have 5 or 6 of them around the house right now. One of them is a scoreboard, which unfortunately with sports being canceled at the moment isn't working. But with baseball season coming up, hopefully returning here June or July, it updates constantly on a little 64 by 32 LED panel, displays the updated scores, runners on bases. I used it some during spring training, and it was a fun project to build. I actually built it for the hockey season, but it's a dual purpose project. And, you learn quite a bit, and it's a learning opportunity for your kids as well. If you have kids with you at home, on how computers work, how programming works. And, you get to do stuff with your hands, which for me, I sit at the computer and play games, write, do that other stuff. So actually building something and at the end of the day, having something fun to use and look at was, a sense of pride. Other Raspberry Pi projects include a magic mirror, which is getting a two-way piece of glass and actually putting a display behind it and seeing
That's cool.
weather updates and your calendar and all that. And then also there's plenty of projects out there to build weather stations. There's a add-on board that you could put onto a Raspberry Pi that'll tell you humidity levels, pressure, and then also integrate weather forecast, which you can put in the magic mirror or use it as a standalone project. Have you messed around with Raspberry Pi at all?
No, I have not. I've been thinking about it. Maybe I'm thinking about maybe a couple, the patrol robots or drones flying around the house. That might be cool.
Yeah. Speaking of Reddit, there's plenty of Raspberry Pi project subreddits that, you could really go down some rabbit holes with some of the projects. There's an antenna you could hook up to a Raspberry Pi apparently that will pick up planes flying overhead, the signals
Really?
they are constantly outputting, and create a map of who is above you right now, or what planes are above you and where they're going. And there are some rabbit holes with Raspberry Pi projects.
Awesome.
What are some other hobbies that not only you can do, but people can do at home, not just for us?
Yeah, so more food stuff, right? Because I am a foodie, right? And I believe in I wouldn't call myself a prepper, but there are some things that you can do that have backup food supplies or just food you want to eat. Food dehydration. You can get them on Amazon, but you could also do it in the oven. And most food dehydrated units maybe cost between $50 and $100, $150, depending on the size of the unit, depending on how many trays you want. Jerkies, fruits, vegetables. If you're part of a CSA, or if you join a company like Misfits Market, where they send you organic produce every week or every other week, it's a great service. You may get too many vegetables and fruits as a result of it, and you don't want it to go bad. But you know what? You slice it up, put it in the food dryer, and then you can use dried vegetables for soups and things. Fruits you can just eat straight out of the out of the bag, because they got sugar content and it's eating candy. Food preservation, canning, pickling, making jellies and jams, right? It sounds like, J2 should be Jebediah 2 at this point. We're starting to look a little Amish. But those are fun things to do. My wife likes to make yogurt in her Instant Pot. You can make fantastic quality, Greek style, thick yogurt in one of those devices. We've also been herb growing. A couple of months ago, we bought this machine. It's like a little pot, and it's got UV LED lights on the top. And basically, you put these little pods in of things like basil, dillweed, all the different kinds of things. parsley, that kind of stuff, Thai basil. It grows really fast with these UV lights. You pour the water in, and it tells you when it's, it needs to be fed more water. The
Interesting.
lights run on a schedule. I think 15 hours a day is what they run. You can put it in the corner. Works great. Look, if you have an outdoor, a trough, you can grow them in there too. Herbs grow really fast and easy. I happen to like those things. Some people like to work with their hands. Ceramics, that's a great thing if you like to. I mean, obviously, having a kiln and stuff, maybe actually being able to bake stuff, that might be a little difficult. Where you are. Knitting, macrame. I have a friend, all she does is she makes sweaters and like different knickknacks and cozies and things. Those are fun. But there's so many things that you can do, so many hobbies that you can do that don't require sitting in front of a computer screen all day. And that'll make you crazy. So if you're occupied, if you're doing something, if you're making something, even if it's not a ultra productive thing, even if it's it's artistic, if it's purely aesthetic, it's still something to keep your mind off of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. And even that was my point with the Raspberry Pi projects, even though they're still connected to the internet and you're on a computer doing your research or programming or whatever, at the end of the day, you've put something together, and there's, like I said, a sense of pride there with it. And even though, the technology is still involved, the display I built, it's fun. I mean, my kids have enjoyed looking at it when the season was still going on. There's a clock aspect to it. It's a little morbid, but the guy who created the NHL project has now introduced a board that tracks COVID cases, and you can go worldwide, by country, by state, and it'll tell you, how many people are sick, how many tests are positive. So we don't use that portion of it, but it's been a fun and interesting project, and I've learned a ton about programming. And I learned how to solder on this project. I had to solder.
I used to do that
wire.
as a kid with Radio Shack, type of projects, with soldering irons and breadboards and things like that. And I used to. This is back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, right before we really had personal computers. We had various different, electronics projects, Heath kits and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if those things still exist. But I do have to say, this is, using your hands in an interactive way, whether it's repairing something or making something new is so rewarding. I mean, I didn't realize it. I forgot what that was like for the longest possible time. Recently, as I bought the new iPad Pro.
Yeah.
And the iPad Pro currently does not really have any protective cases for it.
Yeah.
But I did have a couple of spare OtterBox and UAG cases from the previous model. And what I had learned just by measuring the new model was that the only thing that they changed, literally the only thing that they changed, was the camera output, the camera cutout.
Yeah.
And so I took a template of the new iPad, and I drew on the old case, took out my Dremel tool, and started cutting away. I cut away at the plastic with the Dremel cutting blade, and I used it on the rubber part of the wrap for the OtterBox Defender, and I made myself a new case.
It's a custom case. Custom case.
Awesome. Case customization, extreme OtterBox case mod, but it works.
Yeah,
it works.
Absolutely.
And I sat there and it probably only took me 20-30 minutes, but I felt like it's not exactly a huge creative skill, but I feel like I accomplished something, and I felt good about it. I literally forgot about all this garbage going on for a good half an hour or an hour while I was just trying to buff out the tiny little bits of plastic and stuff. It was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be really interested to hear or read what our viewers are doing for their hobbies as well.
Yes.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. Let us know what you're doing to pass the time, and any new hobbies you've picked up. Any closing thoughts, Jason?
No, and again, we talked about mental health before in one of our earlier podcasts. Meditation and reading and just
Yeah.
breathing and trying to be present. But having a hobby is also about being present because you are focused on what you're doing right then and there and the
Right.
now. You're not distracted by anything else. So you really need to think of hobbies not just as entertainment, but mental health care, taking care of your brain, turning off all the other stuff and distractions. You can't just sit and read news all day. You can't look at Facebook all day. You can't
Yeah.
work all day, right?
It's
There's got to
bad.
be something else,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Going back to brewing my own beer, that's a 3 or 4 hour process. Depending on your equipment, it could be up to a 6 or 8 hour process. And that's a full day of doing something that takes your mind off of everything that's going on outside of your home or of your environment. And so, pick a hobby that allows you to escape for a little bit. It's healthy for you. It's healthy for everyone you're around as well, to be 100% honest. All right. I'm Jason Cipriani.
And I'm Jason Perlow.
Thanks for watching us. Make sure to check out zdnet.com for more videos and content from both of us. And this is Jason Squared.